So you
We
have
have it.
no preparation.
No, it's good.
Normally I say like one or two words and then I start talking. You go, you know what? You should start pushing record. So I'm just going to push record before I start saying the two words.
There we go. 2 words. Here we go.
Epistemological value.
Jesus Christ. Here we go. I need my tea.
So, for those that watched my Voltcraft episode 2, about halfway in, I dropped the bombshell that didn't really seem like much of a bombshell to me, but apparently it does to other people, that I want to add a value to my research notes. We've spoken about this before, some sort of quality
That was
value.
a bombshell. Sorry, that was a bomb. I've watched it. I am prepared this time. I did actually watch that yesterday. So I was like, oh, I wonder what he's doing with his Volcraft. That's a bombshell.
Apparently so. I've had DMs like, "How are you doing? How are you going to do this? And what numbers are you going to do this?" And I was like, "Okay." Now in the Linking Your Thinking conference, the roundtable, I have shared my personal views on the conference in my Patreon, which I'll leave that to the Patreon viewers. But there was a roundtable. I take it you've watched them.
I've watched at least one of them.
Okay, I have 4 because there were 4 days.
Yeah, I gathered.
Yeah,
I look forward to recapping all of those. Do you have notes?
yeah. My notes are in my Obsidian, all the 2 or 3 lines of them. No, but the roundtable was really interesting to hear the conversations, and the epistemological value was brought up as an actual point in the conversation. It's like, oh, I'm doing this right now. I want to know what's going on. And there was a link that was shared to me that I haven't gone through yet, that I'm having a look at, which is trying to give a number of value, a quality, a confidence value to your research, to your notes. And I want to discuss it because I want to get your perspective. Like, how would you rate, rank, not necessarily your notes, but an article, a piece of content, or something with confidence? What metrics come to mind?
I think it would be what type of content it is. So I would rank a paper higher than just a simple blog post with no references.
Why? Because we have a social bias to say, hey, academic papers are better than videos. But why? Some papers are absolute trash.
Peer review?
So?
I don't know. I don't actually know why.
Exactly. And this is something, this is why I've struggled, why I struggled to put out episode 2, because I was like, I want to get this value in, but how do I make the value? Because if I use the H index for academic papers, well, none of the other context has an H index, so I can't use that, because you can't generalize it. If I try and use something like the H index, for those who don't know, it's a value put on papers of how how many citations there are, how confident it is from peer review, how scrupulous the review process was, but it's biased because reviewers are biased. I mean, there was a paper.
Well, everything is biased. That's the problem. There is no.
So there's a paper that came out quite recently. I bookmarked it because I saw it on Twitter. 65% of reviews have a positive status bias. So because the status of the paper is supposedly going to be high, so there might be a high impact, it's given better scores just because of either the person associated with the paper, or because of the potential status it has. So if it's talking about a popular topic, it's 65% of them will get pushed through to publication. And you're like, what? What about the rest of academia? And we've spoken about the limitations of academia before and the publishing world and all that kerfuffle. But yeah, so what metric would you use? If I use the amount of references, well, I could just find like 200 videos that reference the Feynman technique and say, hey, yeah, this is really good. No, it's not. It's a lot of crap. It's just everyone's talking about it.
I suppose it goes down to what we've been talking about. I think you did touch on it. It's like the depth. I don't know.
Like, I agree. Depth,
go.
But how do you measure
but then
depth?
how do you define? Yeah, I went ahead with like, how do you define depth? How do you define depth? Because you can't, not easily, because what is deep in some respects is too, I don't know.
So this is where I'm at with this. Forgive the long word epistemological. But it's the study of knowledge. When you look at the epistemological debates about what knowledge is, there is no one really has a definition for what knowledge is, because it's a dynamic, moving word. There was the justified true belief, but Gettier cases kind of throws that out the window and says, well, this is justified true and it's a belief, but it's not knowledge because it's not true. And that then you start to bring in the idea of, okay, what is truth? What is a belief? What's the difference between them?
We actually started our entire podcast on when we came back. That was one of the words we used, was like, what is truth?
Exactly. And I don't think there is an answer to any of them, because it's a perception. It's a perception of what knowledge, belief, truth is. So knowledge itself is dynamic and it's going to change on the perspective. And the same can be said for depth. So that inherently means the depth of a note, i.e. the value, the epistemological value added to a note, can decrease as well as increase. So you could have a 5-star note, but then you read something and you realize, actually, that note isn't 5-star, it's 2.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've got things that go down and up, how do you then measure whether it was a 5-star and then goes down a 2-star? Does it need to go to like another level, a side level of, I was at 5, now I'm at 2? Because your depth of understanding has still increased because you know more. It's like when you look at a TV screen, you have pixels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here I go. Like, I think this is where gaming can come in. Because I think a piece of, like, it starts at level 1 and it gains levels. And I think the question is lowering the level. And it's like choosing when it goes past a threshold is the question.
Because what I have in my head is like a level prestige of some sort. But how do you where's the experience come from? Where's the level come from? Where's the level up come from? Because what I have in my head as an analogy is, if you've got like a phone, you have a certain amount of pixels and you fill up that phone and now it's a full screen. But now you put that phone screen on an iPad, the same size screen, the same pixels on an iPad. Well, now you've got loads of blank pixels. And then you fill it all out, and then you put it on a TV screen, and now you've got more blank pixels, etc., etc., and it just gets bigger and bigger. And that's how knowledge evolves and gets bigger, which is what the vault is. My vault is, which is what our notes is, our knowledge is. It just gets bigger and bigger. So it's like I'm moving from the phone to the iPad. That's the prestiging level. But how do I get a pixel in there? What does a pixel mean? I mean, you could use time on topic, but
time, yes, I suppose time is one. That's an easier one, I think. It's the easiest one. How long have you been researching the topic? Because I suppose the idea being, the more you stay in a topic, the more you learn about the topic, and the further your understanding develops, and etc., etc. So time is one.
But there are so many contributing factors.
Yeah.
Which is where I need like a combined score, which is the original idea was to have 3 or 4 metrics and combine them together to create a score, which I still think is needed. But what are those things that I'm going to put in? Obviously, they've got to be subjective, because they can't be objective, all of them, because I need to have a subjective expectation and perception of what my note is in comparison to others.
Well, I think the objective one is just time, because that is a thing that is linear in our current understanding. The longer you spend with it,
I'm just thinking, because each block in my note, I'm thinking about what's actually in my notes. Each block in my notes, once the note has been written, is a point. It's a valid point, which means the size of the note will, in theory, show the depth of understanding of the note. Because if I've processed the note and whittled it all down, if it's 100, 200 words, well, it's obviously not that deep. If it's 4,000 words, there's obviously more blocks and points in there. And if each of those blocks and points have references, well, now I have the size of the note and the amount of references with the note. Yeah.
And that also kind of when one of the things that I've always struggled with when it came to note taking is like having that master note. Like, how small or big do you make the note? And I was thinking with you for the points, if you have a note that has few points, like once you've summarized it, you've progressively sorted it out, and it becomes too small, it's still a low level. However, then if you merge that with another note, like going up the category, that means that other note becomes better quality. And so that might actually be a really good idea, like the number of blocks. How you would do that?
Well, file size.
Hmm?
File size. It's a metric already in Obsidian.
True, but but images make the file bigger, doesn't it?
I would have to have a look at how much.
Yeah,
Like,
because
I
I
wouldn't be
think
able to.
images.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to use it for all of them because obviously some of my notes have loads of like source information in that I need to process. So some of the notes are going to be absolutely massive because I've got like the same point in 200 times from loads of different sources. But I think file size is something that I could use as an arbitrary number, or just word count if I can grab that somehow. I don't think I can. Even though it's taken into Obsidian, DataView doesn't seem to have that value. I've only found some scripts like GitHub scripts to get it, which is a pain.
Mm.
But yeah, file size, combining that with references for points, I think would be useful. I mean, if a reference isn't high quality, I could put it somewhere else so it doesn't count, I guess. Like it doesn't.
Or can you pull the quality, so to speak, from the reference? Can you do a score of the quality of references? So each one has its own quality score, so to speak, which how you would
Yeah.
define as the problem. And can you pull that data into that page
Yes,
to
and then
the
use
original
it.
note?
I mean, that'd be a lot of searching and indexing and finding, but it's certainly doable. Yeah. I don't know. Something to ponder.
What is your end game? What journey are you taking? Where are you going with this?
When I look at my research dashboard, I would like to know which areas of research I am deeper in on, which areas I'm not, which ones I have more questions in than others, which ones I need to start, should stop, can explore, could link. All of that information comes with being able to have a quality of the page. At the moment, it's all in my head. But as my research starts spanning out, which is what it's been doing in the last couple of months, I'm looking at a note and I'm forgetting where I was with it. So when I think about cognitive load theory now, I have to try and remember all the points I have in the page because there is so much to CLT and it links to so many different places. And I want to just be able to have an overlook and go, oh, I've got 5 sections. There's this much quality in this page. I've got this many references in this page. It's a pretty good page. Kind of like when you go to Wikipedia, you go to the page and you just know if it's a good page or not. Either the banner's at the top or you got the star at the side, the value at the side.
How do they define it?
They have moderators. A page goes.
What is the criteria?
The same things we've spoken about. So whether the sources are valid, whether there's credible information in there, whether there's critique in there, whether it covers enough depth from the subjective moderator's views, which I would be doing myself anyway. Oh, that's where I got most of my ideas from. Is how Wikipedia moderate their pages.
Yeah. So it's very subjective, unfortunately.
Yeah, but that's knowledge. You can't really have an objective value of knowledge because it's
True.
a dynamic, subjective experience of something. But yeah, so I'm stuck a little bit.
Yeah. The question is, does it really matter?
Yes.
Why?
It matters to me, like the value matters to me because
Yeah.
it gives me a starting point. It won't necessarily matter to anyone else, but it'll matter to me.
Okay,
and
so what's the starting point?
well, at the moment,
Yeah.
my starting point for research at the moment is just follow the next paper that comes up or the next piece of content that comes up. Whereas I can look at something that's great for a month, but then when I go back to something, I don't know what to go back to, when to go back to it, or why I would go back to it. I would have to read through the page again and sort of treat my note as a new source that I'm familiarizing myself with again.
Mm.
And I don't want to have to go back to it and be like, oh yeah, I remember writing that now. Let's go and do X, Y, Z. I just want to go into the page and have a look at like a list of questions at the bottom of the page. Go, oh, okay. Oh, that's an interesting question. I saw something recently about that, and then go wherever. And I already know the page is high quality, so I don't have to try and evidence the original point to then go and find the new information wherever it is. So yeah, it saves me time having to reread things that I've already written.
Okay. I suppose it's just a case of starting.
Yep. That's where I got to, which is why I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I would just try it out and give it a go and see which one. Start arbitrary, and then as you figure it out through the videos that you're going to be recording, you can make those changes.
Yeah.
And you could start. What is the simplest way you could start? That's the question. That's how I always start. It's like,
So a subjective star rating. A subjective star rating of just going, this is a 3, this is a 4, this is a 5, this is a 2.
All right. Have fun.
Yep.
It's not tags, so good luck doing that on every single
Oh no. No way. I mean, yeah, because you'd need like hashtag depth, then subtag 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5. And I'm gonna put metadata in that. I'm gonna use data view.
Yeah, I would do that because it just sounds like hell.
Yeah, as you saw in episode 2, even though
As I saw in episode 2.
yeah, even though I have loads and loads of notes and I've like I haven't dumbed it all down, but I put it all in one folder. I've actually got less tags now and less folders.
Yeah, I did
more
like
organization.
Really nice. Yeah, it's really nice.
It's really simple as well.
Mm.
I I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before. I went into my folders, into my Vault folder to move all of my new notes into my working folder. I was like, there's nothing there. Oh yeah, I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna cop in and do a similar thing because I did see that in the video where you don't have to move things around because you have a default place for it to go. I'm like, why did I not know that? That is very nice. It is very nice.
Yeah, there's a few plugins that I've been browsing around as well that I'm going to explore. Whether I use them or not, I don't know, but I'm going to explore them. And obviously they'll be in the Vaultcraft video because I want to see if it works in my Vault. I don't want to see if it works in a blanket Vault because there ain't nothing in it.
Yeah.
So I've made a copy of my Vault for testing things out in case things break.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I made a bit of a boo-boo as well, which I had to rectify yesterday. I did all of those changes in my episode. Well, I synced it to my phone, but I didn't sync all of it to my phone because it took a while because I made 4,000 changes. Yeah. So I forgot that I didn't finish off the sync. Then I made more changes, and then I synced that to my phone. But obviously the phone had the most recent update of the files that I changed that it hadn't quite fully updated. So it basically wiped 300 pages worth of notes because the notes were empty. And I synced it. Yeah. So I had 360 notes that were just completely wiped. They were blanketed. I still had the name of the note, but there was nothing in it. So I went to my backup and I did a copy and paste because I couldn't find the note in the folders and just drag them over because they were all in one folder and they were sporadic all over the place. So yeah, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. Basically the same as all my tags. You know, in Minecraft, where you just dig out massive holes, or you build things over and over and over again. You break down, this is the equivalent. Copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. Yeah, I was listening to music the whole time. I must say, the Caracorder made things so much easier.
Yes, you're now one-handed now.
Yeah. Oh, and I mean, this is partly my own fault. I dropped my main keyboard. My main keyboard at the moment is on my desk because when I do need to type fast, I type on that. But everything else is on the Caracorder. And I dropped the keyboard on the Caracorder and it hit one of the sticks. Yeah. So my J key now doesn't work on the right side of the Caracorder and the whole stick is a little bit soggy. So I've contacted the support team, which kind of like a pain in the arse. But because you can mirror it, I can use my left hand for the J key instead. I just push the thing down and then go across. So I'm quite lucky in that. But yeah, it's a pain in the ass that I've now broken a stick. Three of the 4 directions work though.
It's super weird that it was that easy to break.
Oh no, it was like because the Caracorder was on the floor and the keyboard was on my desk. So it's like a fairly big drop. But yeah, I mean, it was like the edge of the keyboard hit the top of the thing. It's kind of like basically I got a hammer and like bashed the top of the stick. Which yeah, I mean it's like dropping your phone. The keyboard's a little bit more stable because it's just a big square block thing. Like a controller, like a remote controller, I guess, with a joystick. When you smack a stick in, it can get stuck or broken or whatever. I don't really know what's underneath the Caracorder sticks, but when you've got 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9 within like that space, I would imagine the circuitry underneath is quite tightly packed.
That's true. I hope you get it fixed and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've already had contact back from the Launchpad software thing that's a bit odd. My average score is not appearing, but my top score is. So I know I'm getting better, but I don't know on average how much. Yeah. So, yeah, and something else I want to bring up from the conference. There were lots of things that irritated me. But one point from Joey that he tweeted about that I want to bring up is creativity is the practice of ideas. A creation is the expression of those ideas. That's it. What do you think? So creativity is the practice of ideas. You're making funny faces, but the audio is not coming across.
I guess it's not wrong, but it's not. And I can't describe it, and I have no reasoning apart from the fact it doesn't feel enough. It feels like one of those annoying statements that people make to sound cool on Twitter.
It was a Twitter post, so.
No offense meant to anyone who does that. I have done that too. It's marketing. I get it. That's the game we have to play. I get that. I just want more.
So my immediate reaction was very similar. I think I know what his talk was as well. I think this is just shallow. I think it's just a very shallow statement that doesn't really say anything.
Yeah.
Creativity. What is creativity is my first question. And you've said, is the practice, okay, what sort of practice, what type of practice, and how are you defining practice? Of ideas. What is an idea?
Yeah,
like,
there's not enough.
Yeah, there is nothing to it.
Yeah.
And then a creation is the expression of those ideas. Okay, what is expression? Is that internal? Is that external? What medium are you talking about? And again, ideas. What does an idea mean? Is it an original idea? Is it just something you came up with while you were having a shit on the loo? Like, what is it? Sorry.
Yeah, I find these statements really hard, and I think I've pulled a couple of questions. I've literally gone, "What do you actually mean?" I've actually gone in there. I think it's Elite Digital, and he said something in the past. I'm like, "What do you actually mean by that?" Because I like what you're saying, but it's also not enough. And that's kind of where I get with most things. It's like, yes, but what do you mean? This is what I'm taking from it, but what do you actually mean? Because it sounds like a platitude. It just sounds like something you're saying because it sounds cool.
Take out of a fortune cookie. Oh,
Yeah,
great.
it's kind of out of a fortune cookie. It's kind of philosophical discussion. It's like, yeah, cool. Let's get philosophical, but actually, let's go a bit deeper than that than just the whole Twitter meme post.
So I'm going to expand this a little bit further because I think this gets to a point that he spoke about in his talk in the session, which relates to the book that I can't remember his book. I didn't really pay too much attention. Sorry, Joey. I was listening in the background because it was a really, really good talk. The Laws of Creativity.
You know, most people watch this, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I'm honest. I'm honest and blunt, and that's how I think it should be. If you don't like it, ask, talk. We can have a discussion, and that's what I would prefer, rather than people just go, "Oh yeah, I don't like that," and then leave it. Like I prefer to have conflict, as we were saying like a few episodes back. I prefer to have conflict and me just be wrong and me being vulnerable to being wrong than me sitting on my back horse and going, "I'm not going to tread on those eggshells. I don't want to break anything. I don't give a shit." So yeah, the laws of creativity. I stopped caring like 4 or 5 years ago. The laws of creativity. He said that the book is marketed in a different way because of the editor changed it slightly into it. Different things added, and lots of stuff taken out because of context and loads of stuff. It comes out in October, I believe. Yeah, middle of October. And in the book, he talks about something called the grok threshold. He spoke about it in the conference. Ironically, this was after him saying we need to avoid jargon and keep things simple. And then he talks about the grok threshold. I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And he said he likes to add names to things, and he needs to add names to things so you know what you're talking about. And like that's the whole point of jargon. You just contradicted yourself there. Anyway, he contradicted himself a couple of times, and I did point it out in chat. But yeah, so this grok index.
You're just like the bad boy of PKM, like yeah. So what the hell do you mean?
Well, my presentation was basically saying the second brain isn't a thing, and we should be creating an extended environment of cognition. So I basically poo-pooed the entire conference and took a different perspective.
How is that received? Before we go back onto that, because I didn't get to see it, unfortunately. I saw the tweet. I was like, oh shit, that was an hour ago. Damn it! Because I was really hoping to just tune in to hear. Because I from my perception, your presentation was unlike anything that happened in that conference. From my just glancing, and I'm like, are people ready? Like, what happened? What was your experience for you? Did you get feedback, questions? Did you get what you wanted?
It depends how I answered the what I wanted question. I went in wanting to expose people to different ideas, different concepts and different thoughts. Ecological psychology, systems theory being the two new ideas, because I feel like extended cognition is something people are familiar with because of the book Supersizing the Mind, Extended Mind, etc. There were lots of references being put into the chat about the books and things. Lots of stuff happened in chat which I couldn't read because the messages, unlike the other conversations where the messages were like one sentence, they were just like paragraphed messages. I just couldn't read them.
Much deeper.
I don't know whether they were good or not because I couldn't read them. They just went too quick and I was talking to Nick. I don't know if they were talking about what I was talking about or whether it was something else. I just don't know. I just know there were just blocks of messages going. And I just saw the chat get to like 100 messages and I'm like, I can't read this. I can't keep up. The questions I got from Nick were probing questions. They were interesting probing questions. And the one question we actually got from chat was a question I wasn't expecting, but I was happy that we got,
Mm.
which was, does extended cognition include society? Does it include the people around us? Very, very simplified. And in the original paper from Andy and David, they used the example, I can't remember, and I couldn't remember in the conference either, whether it's a waiter or a waitress, whatever, someone waiting with food. They remembered the person's order. And in the original paper, they argue, yes, that is extended cognition, because the waiter or waitress is functioning as a memory store.
Oh, yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, it's the same as a notepad, as a pen, as a paper, whatever, which is where, in my mind, extended cognition is the environment you are in perceiving and creating cognitive thought. I recognize the synopsis between the cognitive and the thought there, and potentially disagreements between the terms, but essentially have an environment that's being assisted by a person or people or things that help cognition. But again, like I said in the conference, it comes down to what your mark of the cognitive is, what your line is to what is cognitive and what isn't cognitive. Not what is the brain and what isn't the brain, what's the second brain, third brain, and infinite brains. What do you class as cognitive? Does it have to be in the system? So like counting the embodied cognition, does it have to be in my system? Does it have to be literally part of, or does it have to just belong to, i.e. belong to the environment of the thinking? And that was the only question we got from the Q&A, because Nick had a couple of questions. I didn't really look at the Q&A either, because I was loads of different things. And I've had a couple of messages as well that people are, I'm getting messages where people are going, I think it's this. And I can see sort of like halfway through their message that they're thinking something else, and then they're thinking something else. So did I get what I wanted from the talk? I think so, because I think people they're thinking about their thinking around extended cognition and all the other areas.
Yeah.
There was no answers.
That was, yeah, oh, of course. I like that, because I think that kind of sums up my experience as someone who came on the journey a little earlier, like with you, of like, you got me thinking about how I think. And as I'm thinking more, I think slightly changes. It does, because I'm like, oh yeah, this is about this. Oh, why would I think that? Oh, okay, it could be that. Oh, yeah. And just having that like back and forth with myself of like, what do I actually think? Am I thinking? What is my thinking? Why am I thinking? Like all of those lovely, delicious questions which don't have simple answers.
Which we did get quite philosophical as well.
Ooh.
So I brought up metaphysics. Yeah, I brought up metaphysics, and I gave the example of using bigs and smalls. So imagine we're in Earth number 1, and we have this metric called height, and we use centimeters, and we have people that are taller than others. But in Earth 2, they don't have a metric called height. They just have a big and a small category. Big people can do this, and small people can do this, but small people can't do that, and big people can't do that. So we have constraints that's been put into this world. But if you take out the constraints, well, now we just have a property called height. What if that property it wasn't a thing, it wasn't even considered? And that's the metaphysics of, okay, let's remove the constraint. And what happens if you remove all constraints of mainly societal constraints that we've put into how we act and behave? What if we remove them all? And that's how I was explaining how I look at new ideas, trying to avoid bias, because Nick, if memory serves, was referring to flow quite a lot. And when he heard something new, he tried to relate it back to flow rather than relate it to something in general. And I was saying, okay, I take a beginner's mindset. I forget everything I know. Well, I throw out everything I know, and I take a beginner's mindset and go, okay, let's start from zero. Let's have a look at all of these really basic questions and assume nothing and have no constraints. I'm in world negative whatever. And then I start adding the social constraints. And that's where I move forwards. And obviously we've spoken about the ADHD conversation and my social constraints at the moment, for me, talking about where I'm at with it, which eventually those constraints will be permeable enough for me to express.
I love how you were like, Let me find the right word there. I love
Yeah.
the pause. Yeah.
Because I need, not for me, but for others, I need the thing inside of the barrier to be a little bit more solid than it is right now.
The thing inside the barrier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking systems theory. I'm thinking the system inside of, if you want to use technical terms, the Markov blanket. The system inside the Markov blanket it needs to be more solid than it is. When I say solid, I mean like more connections, more rigidity, because at the moment it's very fluid, and systems are meant to be fluid. That's the whole point of learning. But before I share it, because I don't want lots of potential backlash, and I want to avoid misinterpretations and misunderstandings, which will pivot us quite nicely back to where we were talking about the grok threshold. But I want to avoid those misinterpretations and misinterpretations and misperceptions of what I'm trying to say, because I think they will be rife.
Can you avoid them? Or are you meaning...
I can avoid the main ones. I won't be able to avoid all of them. But I want to try and...
Can you actually avoid even the main ones?
Yes.
Because are those misconceptions yours, or are they someone else's?
So when you look at the literature behind using misconceptions for conceptual change, the only way to challenge someone's misconception is by sharing the misconception with them. So you share both sides. You could think this or you could think that, and you give them a choice between one or the other. And then they have to make a decision. Oh, okay, which one do I believe more? Now, they are likely to side with their misconception, but it opens up the question. Then as you go through explaining different ideas, different other questions, they can then go, actually, hold on a minute. I don't know if my original answer was right. And that's all you want. You don't need to push them. You don't need to sway them to the other side. You're just getting them thinking about it, which is what I did with you. I didn't say, you're wrong. I just said, well, what if this? And you went, I don't like you. 2 weeks later, you go, you know what? You've got a point.
Yeah.
And that's where I need to get to with some of my ideas. You're a little bit more open because we speak so often.
Yes.
Than the people that will suddenly just, if they see the video, and I'm not solid enough with my explanation and with my exposure to the answers, they're just going to bounce, which is fine. They can bounce. They can just disagree. But then I won't get anywhere with education, which is what I want to do, because I want those people talking to me. If anything, I want those people to comment and be like, no, you're wrong. And then I want to go, why? Tell me why, because that's the learning point. Why am I wrong? Tell me why I'm wrong. And don't just give me the same rubbish that everyone else goes, oh, yeah, it's this thing. Yeah, but what is that? What does that mean? What does that look like? Don't just point me to a document that's really shallow and doesn't give you any answers.
Did you look at that website I sent to you?
No, I've clipped it because obviously I was doing a conference.
Yeah, cool. I was just super intrigued because I'm like, I find it quite interesting. So for context, I shared, I can't remember what it is. Is it Autism Speaks or something? Hang on.
It'll be on your notes.
Yeah, sure, of course it is. Not. What is it? I don't remember now.
I'm bringing up my Zotero.
Embrace Autism.
I'm sure I clipped it.
You're reading your notes. And I'm like,
no, I'm
now?
I'm in my Zotero. I'm sure I clipped it. I've clipped so many things
fair,
over the last...
I didn't either, so I've just clipped it.
Oh, maybe it's the example blog post. Oh no, it won't be that one because I know what that one was. What?
What?
How? I'm sure I clipped it. Okay, I maybe have to go back and clip it. When you sent it to me, I was like in the middle of one of the other conferences and I'd written something down. It's not on that day. Do you remember what day you sent it to me?
Yeah, I sent it on the 27th. Oh no, not 27th. Sorry, 30th.
It was that long ago?
Yeah.
Wow. I may have actually tagged it then.
Yeah, you
I'm
said on the third. You said on the 30th you'll clip it and look at it at some point. But I find that so it's embraced. So for people who are actually listening,
yes. Sorry,
it's
I got
it's it's an
distracted.
article from embrace-autism.com called Autistic and ADHD Traits, which talks about like DSM-5 and like how some of them have been captured and then unique ADHD traits not captured by the DSM and then co-occurring autism and ADHD. It's really fascinating. I actually find it I really enjoyed reading it. Just from a like an understanding. I haven't gone into the papers fully, but I liked how she has presented it. And as soon as I see stuff that's referenced, I'm like, "Oh, reference! Let's go look at that," and then come back later and look at it. And I found it really interesting how ADHD and autism are seen as that in the DSM-5, they are the exact opposite, except from the experience that people have on the spectrum and who also have ADHD, it's very much similar. And that's the interesting thing that captured me. And I know that, we have been talking about that, and I do find it quite interesting. And it just goes to show how the DSM-5 is not quite enough. And when I looked at it, like for myself, the DSM-5 criteria is not enough. It does not explain everything. It is not, as a diagnostic tool, it's so subjective. And that, I think that, from my understanding, is one of your big problems and one of the things that you find so fucking annoying about it is it's so subjective. It's not. It doesn't have a high quality.
Pretty much.
It's like we have all and there is a ton of research, but you got to try and
But the
find
research is so. Yeah, I'm going to say it. It's crap. It's just crap. People say, "Oh, research this and research that," and there was a meta-analysis. Yeah, but when you look at the research, it's crap. Like,
So how do you define what's crap?
Okay, the sample sizes are small. The sample sizes are also biased because they. I mean, a perfect example. Sorry, Anne, I'm going to call you out a little bit. Anne-Marie is doing a PhD on neurodivergent individuals. So she asked, "Okay, I'm doing a paper on neurodivergence. Can people like be involved in blah blah blah?" If you ask about neurodivergence in the sample size, the person that responds to that is more likely going to know what neurodivergence means, which means they are predisposed to the ideology behind neurodivergence. So they're likely to either be ADHD or maybe think they have ADHD or any of the other symptoms or diagnoses underneath that bracket of neurodivergence. So the sample size is inherently biased most of the time because they find people that are either severely ADHD so they can have a clear criteria to use, or they have signals or symptoms that's been diagnosed by someone, some way, somehow. But the symptoms have been diagnosed by different people, so they're not the same. Some people have been recently diagnosed. Some people have been diagnosed for years. Some people don't take medication. Some people do take medication. Everyone reacts differently to the medication, the dosages of medication. And then when you look at the researchers that are involved in it, they are also biased because the majority of them have a bias either towards or against neurodivergence results. There is no impartial researchers that I have found that look into it. If you're interested in neurodivergence and you're interested in the research, most of the time, for whatever reason, they either have ADHD, autism, or know someone that has ADHD, autism, which means they're going in biased. And I'm not seeing any what I would class as impartial research into it. When you look at the social agents involved in what it means to be neurodivergent, you look at the behavior analysis of what the symptoms are. Well, are the symptoms neurodivergent? Or are they just created from the environment that you've assessed them in? And if they are, well, now it matches almost all of the behavior research that we know exists, that we know we have. So are you picking out people because they are acting differently, well, that's a subsection of a subsection, because the behavior analysis group is a sample size that's been cherry-picked most of the time because of certain behaviors they have, addictive behaviors, things like that. As much as Jordan Peterson is controversial and some of the points he raises are quite abrupt, quite sharp, he's got a really good point when it comes to ADHD, in that, well, everyone has it. It's just different severities. And that is literally, by definition, the spectrum that people are measured on. And some people don't have it enough to be diagnosed. I know a lot of people don't like it. But the behaviors that are shown, the symptoms that are shown, everyone has them. But you need to have them chronically over a certain amount of time, which, again, is somewhat arbitrary. And it needs to be affecting your life in some way, again, somewhat arbitrary, in a serious way, again, somewhat arbitrary.
So you were talking about like the spectrum. Are you seeing it as a linear spectrum?
No.
Because I think that is the point. Because of how different it is, it's less of a linear spectrum, which is commonly what is believed, and a common misconception. But it's more of a kind of like this. It's like there are lots of different pieces to it. And one of the things that Embrace Autism has done, they have like an assessment, which some of them are shit. They're like not on Embrace Autism, but the standard assessments are not great. They are really...
My question to this is, what are you trying to get out of the assessment? What are you trying to find? Because every assessment is either trying to find something or trying to not find, so trying to prove that it's not there. You're either trying to prove something exists or trying to prove something doesn't exist. Ideally, in science, you would try and prove something doesn't exist because you're going in assuming that it does. The hypothesis is you have this thing. How can I prove that you don't have this thing? Not how can I prove that you do have it? Because finding something, if you're going in going, I think this person has ADHD or this person thinks they have ADHD, how can I see if they have it? Well, that's easy. Confirmation bias. That's easy to find. How can I find a way that they don't have it? Well, that's harder to find. If you then have this, okay, you do or you don't, now you have a line to use. But the line to use, the DCM-5 and the other documents, it's just so blurred that there is no way to say you don't have ADHD in a good way. How do you do that? What are you really assessing? Because if you're assessing behavior, everyone's going to have different behaviors in different environments. So are you assessing long-term behavior? Well, what is long-term behavior? I watched a video of someone that's been diagnosed with ADHD, and they were diagnosed right towards the end of COVID, right? End of lockdown. And they said their symptoms were emphasized by the lockdown. They didn't recognize they had ADHD in the normal environments because their anxiety was stopping them from acting out, and they were using other ways of thinking that were affecting their behavior. Then when they're put into this enclosed environment, this lockdown environment, now they get agitated, they get distracted easier, and all these other symptoms you typically associate with ADHD were coming to the forefront. And now all of her friends at the time were going, I think you've got this thing. And she got diagnosed. And yes, she had ADHD because it was affecting her for a year. But that was the year of lockdown. Before that, there was no signals at all, no symptoms at all that you could identify because they were being covered by other things in the environment, by other ways of thinking. And if that's true, well, if you take away those other ways of thinking, that other cognitive environment, are you going to expose the symptoms of ADHD? Obviously, because everyone has them, but they're exasperated by the environment you're in, whether that's the physical environment, like the actual physical environment, or the mental environment that you're putting yourself in. If you're mentally putting yourself in an environment that's going to exasperate the symptoms, whatever they are, of ADHD, then you're more likely to portray those things. Can you just mentally throw yourself out of that? Probably not. That's the way that we think. But again, going back to dynamical systems theory, everyone is going to think in different ways. It's not possible to have people think in the same way. It's not possible to say, you're going to think like this now. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. Once again, you're not wrong.
But
like, I don't have it as wrong.
Yeah. I have more questions than answers, which is my irritation.
Yeah. And I think that is also where, like, because I do not seem autistic, but I have a diagnosis. I can talk properly, I can communicate well, but that's only because I've worked my damn ass off to do so. And that's the only reason.
But then if you've worked that hard to get there, is that saying anyone that works hard to get somewhere has
Yeah.
the disability?
Yeah.
No. No, that's just learning.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that was coming up when you were talking about, like, the sample size is how could you do it when doing ASD or neurodivergent assessments? How could you do that in an unbiased way? And the problem is it's so hard to do it, and in fact I'm not sure it could be done, because people who seem neurotypical, and that is not saying that doesn't exist, I still have that they do, that there is a difference. I do still have that there is a difference. But the questions that you're asking are fascinating, because for years, and every single time that I think, okay, no, this is not it, this is fine, but something happens which actually triggers that, and I go, oh yeah, no, that is something that I do actually struggle with still. Is that me? Is it just because of me and the identity that I am and who I am? Or is that something else? Is it a quote unquote medical condition? And that is the question that I'm asking. And I do think that it is societal. I do agree in that way as someone, because depending on where I am is depending on how I behave differently depending on who I'm talking to. Just that's natural. That's how it works.
I think it's Andrew Padella, I think, YouTuber, talks with lots of different people. Padilla, there we go. He speaks with loads of different people, and mental health is a big theme behind most of his episodes. And what you'll see,
sorry, it's Anthony.
Anthony. It's a big theme underneath his videos. And what you'll see, if you not necessarily look closely, but when you look closely at the science behind the conversation, is they all talk about the different environments and experiences that trigger certain issues. When I was doing this, or when I had that, these things happened. So they struggle with depression, with anxiety, with anything, any sort of symptomatic thing, this medical condition, when they were under this stress, that environment, this experience. They were going through these things in their head. Now that they don't have that environment, they don't struggle with that thing as much because of therapy, intervention, etc., etc., etc. So can you out-train ADHD? No, you can't go to therapy and just, oh yeah, I'm now sorted, because ADHD is behavioral, and behavior is impacted by the environment. So if you put yourself back in the environment where those behaviors are likely to come forward, then it's not necessarily a choice you're making.
I think that's what everyone's trying to say. The narrative, there is the us and them thing, like society, blah blah blah. But I think what you just said there encapsulates what, for me and my perception, what I've been trying to say when it comes to society is not built for neurodivergent individuals, because we're all in a similar environment in society. And I think that what you just said there encapsulates the experience that we have. And I note the language of we. I get that, and I note my bias. But I think that does, what you said encapsulates my experience of being on the spectrum, of the experience of interacting with my family. Like my two little ones, both of them have diagnosed autism, and I can tell the difference between when they're at home and the environment that they're in at home, when we're all basically on the spectrum, we are all diagnosed, and then when they communicate with the neighbors who aren't. and I can hear the difference. I can sense a difference.
How do you know they're not?
That's a very good question. That is an assumption I'm making.
Yeah, as soon as you said aren't, I was like, yeah, but how do you know? Because you've just said earlier that you're autistic, but you don't stereotypically look autistic. They don't stereotypically look neurodivergent. Doesn't mean that they're not, just because they're not diagnosed.
No.
So you haven't identified a behavior that you would recognize as neurodivergent?
Yeah, that would be there is a sense. I cannot, once again, this is all subjective, which I'll own. It's a sense. It's a sixth sense. You can just sort of know, and there is no definition. And I know that sucks.
One of us. That's all that's going through my head.
It is very much, you could just tell. It's just a sense.
And I mean, from my perspective, this is an anecdotal experience, but I've had quite a few people say that they have that sense about me. They're like, you are ADHD, you are neurodivergent. I'm like, I don't want to be one of you. It's not a,
which in itself is actually a neurodivergent trait.
Oh yeah. I don't think it is. I think it's a societal trait, but it's
okay. Fair enough.
When I see the us and the you're one of us, and sort of come over to the group sort of thing, I'm like, no, I'm a sit on the fence right here. I'm in between you two, because I don't think there is a sides. I don't think it exists. I think it's been created, because I would associate myself more with a neurotypical person, because when I see I'm gonna call what's his name, Andrew, the guy on Twitter that talks about ADHD all the time, Andy.
Is it ADHD?
Yeah, all ADHD stuff. I can't remember his name. He's got like a couple of YouTube videos out as well. Anthony. Oh, I can't remember. This is going to bug me. But he talks about ADHD, but he always says something along the lines of ADHD caused, or ADHD people have, or this ADHD something, and then lists out an experience. And I sit there and go, but normal people, neurotypical people have that experience. What makes it ADHD? And I never get a response. When I look through the comments, it's all, yeah, great, blah, it's like all supporting him. But yeah, but what makes it ADHD? Similar with How to ADHD in her channel. She says ADHD problems with XYZ. Well, I have all of those problems. I don't have ADHD, diagnosed ADHD. So does that mean this video is redundant for me? No, because I still struggle with those things. And the solutions that she gives are valid to everyone, not just ADHD people. And the same thing, when a neurotypical person talks about their struggles with something, it doesn't mean ADHD people can't use those tools, because they may still work for them. And the person that isn't diagnosed as ADHD or hasn't marketed the video as ADHD friendly might still have neurodivergent traits or symptoms that can be helped with whatever tool that they use. So I feel like the label is doing more harm than good when it comes to sharing solutions to problems that people have. Thoughts?
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. I think that there is a danger, and
I think it's an ongoing conversation that needs to be had at more depth. Like,
yeah,
even the ADHD conference that I've had a look at, they still surface the same information. They still use the same resources and the same research that they've been using online and in videos. And I don't see another side. Like, I don't see the argument. I don't see the discussion. I just see the support. Like, everyone is just boosting this thing.
Yeah.
No one's poking it. I'm not seeing anyone like poking it or challenging it or going, hey, I don't agree. I don't see those conversations. I don't see them. I think partly it's because you've got to have thick skin to be able to poke a bear as big as ADHD and neurodivergent movement. It's kind of it's not political, but kind of is political.
I think it is political.
And it's a bear that I don't think a lot of people are. I'm going to say I don't think people are competent enough to challenge, because ADHD is behavioral and learning immediately brings in the brain, and not enough people understand the brain well enough to challenge how it functions and works, because most people that understand the brain, they're not concerned about social impacts and behaviors, because most of them concerned about how neurons fire, what part of the brain activates in certain tasks, and all of those different Stroop tasks and things like that. Or they're looking at biochemical reactions in the brain. You're looking at computational neuroscience as well, like all the numbers and Bayesian statistics. To be rude, but not to be rude, but they don't care about the people. They care about the thing that's in the brain. They care about the neurons. The society they're not fussed about. Andrew Huberman's probably the closest person to bringing that in. But if you listen to his podcast episode on ADHD, he talks about dopamine. Great, cool. So what? Like when I really challenge it, so what? Everyone has dopamine. Everyone has changing dopamine levels. And he went through in the podcast that the environment will change the amount of dopamine you have. What you consume changes the amount of dopamine you have. Everyone will have different base levels of dopamine. So we are categorizing ADHD with people that have a higher baseline level of dopamine. But what if those people don't put themselves in environments that increase it so that it mimics the symptoms and behaviors? Well, now that category, that criteria is redundant. and it's just a natural variation in people, which is what I would argue neurodiversity is. It's natural variations of humans and the way that we think. Yeah, that's going into depth, and again, trying to circle back to this grok threshold. Is the idea is that you explain your idea, your concept, your thought to someone else, and they need to understand it. That's it. They need to understand it. You know what this reminds me of? The effing Feynman technique. Yeah. He said that to be able to, you need to explain things to other people so that they understand it. And I asked him, how do you avoid oversimplification with the grok threshold? And he said, don't worry about it. And I was like, you what? Sorry? Don't worry about it. Misconceptions, misunderstandings, false news, fake news. You're literally supporting fake news. I was bashing my head against the table. It was, yeah. That's the grok technique. You need to explain something to someone else so that they understand it.
For one, that is assuming that they want to understand it. As we've been talking about with this ADHD conversation. Yeah. Like the neurodivergent, that's assuming they want to understand it.
Exactly.
Because they may not want to. So does that mean that that basically dismisses everything? And then we have oversimplification, which we're just not going to touch because they could be here for a while. But just that you have to explain something so that someone understands. You, in my opinion, cannot make someone understand something. It's not about making the other person understand. You and I, that just takes everything away. That takes everything away.
He tried to, I guess justify. He tried to justify his point multiple times, and when he was explaining it, he kept trying to give the same point. It was kind of like he didn't have any evidence or any research to back it up, and he was just explaining this point over and over. Oh, he referenced the paper, and I was like, I'm going to read through the paper and critique it because I don't know where it came from, and that's something else. And he used this example of the grandma index, right? And he said, how would your nan explain it? And if she and use those
That's
sorts
the
of terms
Feynman
and words,
technique. That is the Feynman technique. That is exactly the Feynman technique.
yeah, exactly,
Just with another word.
exactly. And I was just like, no, that's rubbish. Like just because your nan can explain a phone as going, it's a computer on a screen, right? Yeah, that's a phone. What else can a phone do? Apps, speech, talk, text, literally any other app involved in it. I mean, the new
It's a computer with a screen. That misses the fact that it's a phone.
yeah.
Like, let's just strip all the apps away. Like, it's a phone. A computer is not a phone. Like,
I mean, not being funny, the new iPhone, whatever it is, and the Mac thingy conference, Apple shit.
Yeah.
I don't watch that, but I watched MKV. I watched Marcus's video. The sat phone thing, that's new. That's got nothing to do with the computer.
Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah. Like,
Computer can't do sat phone stuff.
You can't. Simplification. Stop it.
Yeah, it's like no understanding. There are depths of understanding. That's what knowledge is.
And you've got to decide whether you want that. I'm going to harp on. You've got to decide whether you want to understand, and that decision is not with you. You cannot make someone understand. No matter how much you tell me that ADHD or an autism do not exist, I understand your point, but I don't agree. Like understanding, I assume, means you have to agree with them. And I'm just like, yeah. I mean, is that how do you measure their understanding?
You can't.
How you exactly which actually leads right back to the beginning of today. Like, how can you measure understanding? Is there a threshold of understanding before you can?
But that was his point. There is
and
a
that's
threshold.
Subjective.
Exactly.
That is ridiculously subjective.
Tell me about it. Yeah, and I mean, so the book is about creativity, and he was using this grok threshold to explain the creative ideas that you have, right? And I'm like, okay, forget all of the creative, the practice, the ideas, and all that stuff. We've spoken about that already. So you have an idea that you think was creative, and you're explaining it to someone else. How in the world are you going to explain something that is, quote, creative to someone that hasn't had the same experience as you? I mean, Richard Feynman said it in one of his interviews I referenced in the Feynman technique video. He can't explain how magnets work to the person that was interviewing him. He couldn't explain how magnets worked to that person because that person didn't understand the physics behind magnetism. So all he could say was magnets attract. And that's an oversimplification from Feynman's explanation. And the interviewer wanted more, but Feynman can't give more, as he said, because he wouldn't understand the words he's going to use. And it's the same as me trying to explain, like when I was explaining to you ecological dynamics to start with, there is no point me going, yeah, metastable attenuation works with affordances and constraints. Could you go, what do one of those words mean?
Yeah.
Direct and indirect perception. What do those words mean?
And why do I care as well? That's another thing. It's like, why do I even care? Like, yeah, that's nice. Fancy pants words, you sound like a smart ass. Go away.
Exactly. So, yes, there is a threshold for someone to receive information. Great. So, doesn't mean they're going to learn anything from it or take anything from it. That you need to be, if anything, pushing their understanding to get anywhere. Like if you're going to get a new idea anywhere, someone needs to be willing to accept either they're wrong or they misunderstand something or there is something new that they haven't quite grasped.
Willing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And what my perception of what I heard from that is that it doesn't matter whether they're willing, they have to. Like, and I'm like,
that's how it came across. That's how it came across. And I was like,
no, I have a big fat fucking no about that one. Because that is seriously yeah.
So I'm gonna be having a look into, I don't know whether I'll read the book because I don't, the reason I don't like buying these books is because they are so shallow.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can recommend the book, but I mean, as his response to me said, don't worry about oversimplification. you don't know who you're talking to. I mean, yeah, that sounds very egotistical, but you don't know who you're talking to. I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist. I look at the nuance. If I don't have nuance, then I'm just the same as everyone else using shallow concepts and ideas that doesn't have any, what I would class as dynamic answers to give. So if you're not going to if you're not going to give me the nuance or give me any complexity in a book, why would I read it? I would much rather have a 20-page document on one idea than a 100-page book on 100 ideas that mean nothing. Yeah, I mean, I know that's the public marketing stuff, but depth, give me depth, please. I mean, the cultural tutor, Sheehan, I think his name is, talks about architecture. On Twitter, his account's massive. It was on the second day. I had no interest in architecture, and the research process that he had was very superficial. He finds an interest, he reads a book, and then he talks about it on Twitter. But he made a really good point. He wants more depth. He doesn't want that v that. Why? Why is that better than that? Why is that nicer than this? Why is that good? Why is that not good? Why did this last? Why didn't that last? He wants more depth in architecture and the culture around the architecture that's been built and the history. And to that, I go, yes, please. But where is it? And as soon as you give depth, people go, nah, I don't want this, too complicated. Oh, yeah, that paper that I referenced that I want to bring up was a NASA paper. Yeah, he referenced this NASA paper and said that I might get these numbers wrong, but something like 96% of children are like have genius level creativity, and then they lose it when they go into adulthood or something like that. And I was like, right. How do you measure creativity? How do you measure what a genius is? How do you measure them over a long period of time? And what does creativity mean in that context?
And it's also a different context depending on where you are, once again.
And what you're doing. Because if you're measuring a child's creativity in something they don't care about, it's going to be low. Multiple intelligences. 96%. That sounds really cool, but it's a number that you could pluck out of the air.
Yeah.
It means F all. And he's using that as his base study for the book, for creativity, laws of creativity. And I'm like, what sounds like a pretty poor study is being used as the basis of a creativity book. To me, that is emphasizing false news, fake news, misinterpretations, shallow understanding. Gripe, irritation. Yeah. This has literally just been me ranting for like an hour.
Pretty much.
Yeah, do you want to share something while the audience stop listening to me ranting?
I mean, I had a bit of a rant too. I do just agree in so many. Yeah, I think I can't remember who it was. Someone tweeted around the shift of media to these short, tiny chunks of information and how there's lacking depth and lacking more. And I agree. I said, yeah, I want more. I don't want to just have, and that's something that I'm trying to figure out in my own business is how can I bring more of the nuance in to what I do when marketing and the way that the algorithm and all the stuff goes is looking at short, sharp, 90-second videos. How can you bring back the nuance in 90 seconds? And that is because in 90 seconds I don't have that as being enough to go through all the misconceptions, to capture all of the nuance of what it is to be productive, what it is to be organized, what it is to be. I mean, even just those words themselves, how can you explain what that means in 90 seconds? Because it's so.
That comes back to the tweet response that I got that I showed you right before this that kind of scared me a little bit. The person in Twitter basically said that they wanted me to give a Twitter thread response to one of Tiago's tweets. Because Tiago tweeted something, again, that was quite shallow. It was a question that didn't have much depth to, because I think that's the point of the tweet, to get different responses. But I don't want to give a response that's really shallow. So I would have to give like 10, 15, maybe even 20 different responses, because it's going to change on the context. And this person wanted a thread of me giving all these answers. And that, I think, is the only potential way of doing it. But because it's separate content, you risk people not seeing all the other bits.
Yes. And that's the thing. Like, for me, for my content, I have like layers of depth on what I talk about. The podcast here is the deepest I go normally, because audience, blah, 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 blah. And then as we were talking, I was just like, well, but why? Like, there needs to be more. And then when I have direct conversations one-to-one with people, that's when we go super deep, because I can be super specific, because that is the most effective way of portraying nuance, is directly one-to-one with humans, because that's the darn point. We are all different. We all work in different ways. We're in different environments. We have different things that happen around us. We all have different constraints and affordances, and we're all in a different blanket.
Yes.
And how the bloody hell do you put that into a 90-second tweet?
Well, you can be really provocative.
Yeah, and then that doesn't help
No.
as you're thinking with like ADHD of like, how do you can just be provocative.
I think that's what the short content is, though. When you look at short content, the stuff that does well is either provocative or funny. And most of the time when things are funny, it's because they're provocative in some way. Someone has insulted someone else, or someone has hurt someone else through some medium, whether that's a physical, sociological, emotional, cognitive reason. Normally it's an insult, or someone belittling something else or someone else, whether that's politically, physically, socially. There is someone at the expense, or a group of people at the expense, which is why it does well. It either does well because people hate on it, or it does well because people like it, or a mixture of the two. And that's what short content does. TikTok's full of it. And that's why people watch TikTok, because it's just funny. People either getting hurt or doing weird things. Yes, there are the odd, really impressive things, but once you've seen it once, you're, oh yeah, that's cool, move on. And that's it. It's done. There's no appreciation of how they got there, the expertise it took them to get there, the years of practice it took to get there. You see these time lapses of like, it took me like 1 year of X skill, 5 years of X skill, 10 years of X skill. But that's it. And once you've seen that last one, you're, oh, okay, cool, move on. That's 10 years of the person's life in 7, 10 seconds, whatever, and you skip it.
Yeah.
So much nuance, so much context, so much to learn from that, and people just don't. So short form content for me could be a way to trigger people's emotions to start a conversation. This could be a trigger point to get them to longer content. But most people that watch short content don't want to watch long content. That's why they're in the short content.
Yeah.
Yeah, got no answers for that one.
No, me neither. Me neither. It is one of those things that is just so... Yeah.
So is there anything you wanted to bring up? Because I sort of spoke about the two things I wanted to talk about, and then we ranted for a bit. Is there anything you wanted to bring up from the week?
No.
Oh, the week was pretty boring then. Mine was quite exciting.
Yeah. Pretty much. It's a pretty boring week.
So my extended brain template. I piqued your interest with data view. Have you looked at data view much, or was it sort of oh, that's really cool, that's really nice, I'm gonna leave that because I'm gonna get distracted.
Yeah, it was very much a. I'm going to leave that because I'm going to get distracted. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Very
What
much so.
what ideas did you have from it?
It was less about concrete ideas and more the possibility and the actual options. I need to get really into it first before I start like going crazy and creating stuff. But I have to be very careful that I don't go too crazy and get distracted. I've been working on a project for a client at the moment around learning more about JavaScript as well, which has been fun for me. So I've been doing that, and now I finished that project. It's coming to an end. Now I'm going to go and play. But I'm definitely. I know one thing that's been coming up is like from a business perspective, a concept like the messy middle. When you're in business, you have this point where you're starting and you're throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And then you have the other side where you're at scale, where you're like a bigger company, you have like 5 or 6 employees and you want to go big and you want to do cool, amazing stuff at the end. And then you have this bit in the middle, which is delicious and I find more fascinating than the other two sides. Beginners, easy. You just go try stuff. People who are at that end stage are just like the small
Clip it. Beginners, easy. You just go try stuff.
Well, it's true though, because that's what they do. They just throw themselves at a wall.
But that is like a TikTok clip, and then you go, okay, right, here's the context and nuance to that.
Yeah. So beginners, easy. Just go throw stuff at the wall. Don't think about it. And then you have the other side of like the scale where you just want the icing on the cake, the cherry on the top, the small little tweaks that you get to in your system, like yourself. You're now on that small tweaks to improve what you're doing. Well, small tweaks.
I was going to say small tweaks. I'm indexing my entire vault for a specific note that's got a tag.
Well, you're actually more. You have been at the small tweaks end for so long, but now you've shifted into this like messy middle where you're redefining how you work, and you're in that point of like you're doing. You know what you want to achieve, and you know how you want to. You have an idea of where you want to go, but you're not sure how you're going to do it yet. And it's that piece in the middle that nobody really talks about. It's always either beginner content or like end content, especially in the business space. Primarily, I'm the context that I'm talking from is the business space. And there is that messy middle where I think people start looking at things like Notion or ClickUp or these more complicated tools. I say complicated because whatever.
As complex as you want to make it.
Yeah, it's as complex. And there's that messy middle where businesses have to try and get from 1 to somewhere near 3, or they want to get to that stage where they can scale, whatever that means and however you define that for yourself, which is a whole nother. But like the messy middle is where so much growth can occur and where growth often occurs, but you have to be careful. You have to balance it, because if you go too fast, you fall because you haven't got the foundations in place to help you.
That's learning.
Yes, obviously.
have I spoken to you about I can't remember the math term for it, but the bifurcation graph where you
that's
start up and it splits to 2 and then
no, I don't think you have.
so
or maybe you have.
It's it begins with an M. It's a Mendeleev plot. I can't remember. It's part of complexity theory and some loads of other math and stuff. But basically, you start off with it's a way of measuring loads of different things. I'm not going to bother going into all of the depths. Long story short, you start off with you got a graph. You got
in the way of measuring lots of things.
Yeah, there's just tons of stuff. I'm not going to bother.
Clip it.
It's literally just me. It would be me saying loads of words and you going, You got a graph. You got a line. The line goes and it gets to a point and it splits. It's called bifurcation. Yeah. It splits into 2. And it splits into 4 and then 8 and then goes into chaos. It just goes all over the place. And then at some point and then organizes itself again. It splits again.
Yeah.
And that is math. Uh, yeah, but that chaos,
Thank you,
is the learning. And over time, I think that's what you're explaining, where you go backwards and forwards. Because you start out at the beginning and it's just try stuff, and 2, 4, 8, and then you get to a point of, oh shit, I've got loads of things I could do now. I need help. And then you sort of get organized and you figure stuff out, and it turns into mess again. And that's the learning experience. That's the way I see it. It's a non-linear learning experience, and that starting point can be reset depending on the environment that you go in.
Yeah.
And I think the chaos is where I like to live in.
I must admit, one thing that I'm taking from your, like, the whole brain thing, marketing, whatever it's called, can't remember what it's called now. What are you calling it? Your
Extended
template.
brain?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Wow. Extended brain. Duh. The extended brain.
I tried to make it easy, obvious. You still
my
forget
brain
it.
is. I think what I love about your extended brain is how chaotic it is. Like, I really find that, and it's a thing that I've been experiencing recently. Like, I'm at that chaos point where it's like everyone just keeps it in their brain. But what if our systems were chaotic? Like, my question is, what if, because our brains are chaotic, they just are. That is, yeah, that's it. And I'm
No,
wondering,
it's a mushy thing inside of a skull.
yeah, exactly. Like, the way we think, the way we learn, the way, like, our cognition, let's put it probably in better terms, because brain extended, whatever. What if we actually had that chaos and we brought it into the world? Instead of pretty dashboards, instead of like over organization, over structure, which has a place, and yes, okay, whatever. But what if we didn't? What would that look like? What would
That was
that
the
look
question
like?
I started with.
What if we didn't? What if instead of trying to organize everything into a structure, what if we just use the environment we're in? What would that look like?
My vault.
Yeah, basically.
But that is the question I started with. You know, when I was talking about metaphysics, we have the constraints of the environment. Well, what if I get rid of that? What if I get rid of that? And that's what I've done. My notes folder, there is no constraint. Every note is a note, and that's it. There's no types of notes. There's no categories of notes. There's no, this is atomic, and this is a literature, and this is a bibliography. No, it's just a note. What I do with the note is going to change. I can have multiple contacts with the note. I can put it in wherever I want. I can break the note apart, because the note is a system, and I can break it apart into its parts, and those parts be part of multiple systems, i.e. multiple notes. And I can surface them where I want. If I want a task to be in 20 places, it can be in 20 places.
Yeah.
And so, something I recently added to my vault is it does take a little bit of speed away from Obsidian, which is a bit of an annoyance, but it's because of what the JavaScript is doing. Is every single related action in my vault wasn't in my progress bar, but it's now in my progress bar-ish. I've taken away the progress bar because that takes even more time to render, and now I have a number for every related action and action. So if a project, a task, whatever, project or research note has something that's related to. So if I in my daily note go, let's actually use a practical example that's from my note. I'm on a couple of days ago, I wrote a task that said, add levels to the Internet Academic course. That was in my daily note. It was just a thought, I plonked it in. When I go to the Internet Academics course, there will be a task that's been summed up to say, hey, this is a related task. In my extended brain template, that's not there because it causes a bit of speed issues, but it means it doesn't matter where a task goes, as long as there is either the appropriate tag or the appropriate link, it's going to be summed up into related actions. And I think for me, it's so much easier. I don't have to worry about where I put stuff. Like in Notion, you need to be in the right database, so you need to have the right link to view, and it needs to be filtered this way. You need to add this right property. No, you just write it anywhere. Doesn't matter where. and it'll appear.
I do like that. Like, and I enjoy the dash. I must admit, I loved your challenge. I was like, I don't know how it would work for business, but I haven't tried. I made an assumption that that it couldn't work for business, and I'm super intrigued to play with that. And how could chaos be brought in for a business? How can you use chaos?
So the way I see it is inside of Notion, to have a task database for everyone, it's got to have a linked view everywhere. Well, in Obsidian, you don't need a task database. So if someone wants to write a task down, they just go onto their page and they write a task down, and it will appear where it needs to appear. All they need to do is make it a task. Control Enter, there's my task. And it's already on the person page. So if you have a query for X person tasks, it's going to show all the tasks wherever you want them to, because it's already got their metadata associated with it. If you want the metadata specific to the task, change the query.
The person page, yeah, that
because we've already got person dashboards, people dashboards, and that is already happening in my Vault. It's just you substitute research with people. Done. Same thing.
And then people would be inside that. Yeah.
They just work in their page. The only limitation to Obsidian is with the sync collaboration, in that if you're on the same page working at the same time.
Yeah, that's the one thing.
That's the only limitation that I can find.
But it's a pretty big limitation.
Yeah. Well, if you're working in the same page at the same time, yes.
Would you be working in the same page at the same time? That's the question.
I think that depends on the workflow of your team and of the business. Because if you're working, if people are working on different projects, they'll be in different pages. And at the end of the day, I would imagine the majority of the work that's done in a business is going to be actions and projects. The actual work itself will be done somewhere else, i.e. in an editing tool or whatever. So what would you really need to write down in the notes at the same time?
That's true.
I don't know. I'm not in business. I'm not in business with a team.
That's better.
I assume that was implied in the context we were speaking in, but yeah, I probably should have made it explicit rather than implicit. But yeah, so I mean, I don't have that experience with working in a Vault with other people much. I mean, the Vault that we have together is not as active as a business Vault, I would imagine, would be, because yeah, it doesn't need to be that active. And we're coming in with ideas anyway, because I can speak for Britain.
Yeah.
I said that to Nick. I was like, we got half an hour. Cool. Give me 3 hours.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
How did you decide what to do? Like, because the stuff you talk about there's so much depth.
Yeah.
How did you decide?
Overview. I knew I wanted to talk about extended cognition because building a second brain. And in order to talk about extended cognition and how I do it in my notes, people needed to grasp what systems theory was, because I don't use atomic notes. I use blocks because they are parts of a system, which is my note. Then when I look at how my notes are written, they are written with constraints and affordances in mind. So I needed to explain roughly what ecological psychology was. So those 3 points came up as obvious talking points. And then I went into those pages. I picked the blocks out that I thought were relevant. So I picked a couple of arguments for and against extended cognition, the main ones, a couple of points about systems theory using some examples, and a couple of examples about ecological psychology. I alluded to a lot of the other areas, but obviously I didn't go into depth because I just couldn't. But because of the way the conference was, I just shared a link to my notes.
Yeah.
So if people want to know, they can go. And I did see one comment saying, I'm going to look at your ecological psychology page. That page has not been sorted.
Sort it, boy. Sort it.
Yeah, that's going to take like a week. That would be an entire VC episode. Like, but that's where I want Vaultcraft to go. The next episode of Vaultcraft is going to be a tour, because I've seen some people be like, I don't really understand what your vault is. And obviously I know what's in my vault. I've been in my vault over the year plus. So I'm going to do a tour of my vault. And then it's going to be literally kind of like Minecraft. I'm going to build a house today. I'm going to build out this note today. I'm going to use these resources from wood, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm going to use these sources from academic video, blah, blah, blah. I'm literally doing a Minecraft Let's Play series, but with an obsidian vault and knowledge rather than blocks and color. How it goes, no idea.
I'm loving it so far. I am enjoying what you're creating there. I am enjoying it.
There are lots of small things in there as well that if people watch the series, kind of like when you watch Minecraft, like when you're watching it and you watch people play it, and I mean, I don't play Minecraft anymore, but when you watch people play it and they're doing things, you're like, oh, did you know you can do this, this, and this? And you're like, what? Where? It's like 15 minutes in a video, be like, where? I didn't know you could do that. And I'm doing the same thing in the Vaultcraft series. So if people watch it, they will get to know the small tips and tricks and sort of hacks. I don't like those words, but things that I use in my day-to-day use of Obsidian. I mean,
yeah, I can't remember. There was a couple in there that was like, oh, it was the folder thing. It was the fact that you can change the default save folder, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
hello. That one caught me. I was like, well, fuck, because that was the bit that I hated. I hate doing the organization bit. It's boring.
Yep, yeah, and that's why I like watching the Minecraft series, like the Minecraft Let's Plays, because you learn about how the game works. Like so I watch Hermitcraft. Most of the Hermitcraft players. This is going to be really nerdy, Minecraft nerdy now. Hermitcraft is a server, and there are loads of players in there. And I watch a certain amount of hermits. I don't watch all of them because some of them are not as exciting to me, but there's loads of them, so you can pick from them. And one of the ones that I watch, he's an extremely technically driven Hermitcraft user, Doc M77, I think. And he goes like, he uses all the technical cheats. I have no idea how any of it works, but it's so cool. And he literally created a massive hole. He went all the way down to bedrock, which with an update is like negative 100 and something blocks plus all the normal blocks, and used duplicated TNT machines flying across the way. It was so cool. I have no idea how he did it. I had no intention of doing it. It took him hours to do it, but I just watched it. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And he's building other things like that. And I'm learning all these technical things about Minecraft, a game that I never play. And these episodes are like 40 minutes long. Like they're not 10-minute videos, but they're interesting. And then I watch other people's episodes like Grian Mumbo when he was actually doing things.
So
yeah.
I have a question, like a content creation question for you around your book. How long does it take you to edit a Vaultcraft episode, so to speak?
I mean, I've only done
how
two.
Do you edit it?
I've only done two.
How long does it take? Because this is the thing that I want to know. Because you're right at the beginning. So how long is it taking you to edit now? What is the barrier to entry?
Time-wise, I don't really know, but I'm doing what the Hermitcraft users do. So when they say things, oh, I'm just editing this now, or just doing, like, I pick up on that because I create content. So what I'm doing is I'm screen recording when I think there is something that could be useful to record. And then I say something when I'm like, oh yeah, this is a good point. Oh yeah, this is a good point. And then when I go into my editing software, DaVinci Resolve, I just look for where I spoke. And I just cut everything else out unless I know something interesting happened. So I will have, I think the first episode I had around 60 clips, but they were like 1 minute long clips or 5 minute long clips of me talking about something. And I just went through, again, Caracorder, very nice. Cut, and I just cut it all down. It was like a 7-hour thing, but I cut it down to about 5 minutes in about 10 minutes. because
Yeah,
most
'cause
of
you
it was just
have
blank
to-
space.
Yeah.
Because I know what I want to bring in, and then when I watch it through, I'm like, yeah, they don't really need to know that. They don't really need to know that. I have had feedback though that they want to know a little bit more. So
Yes, I saw that. I also agree. I want a bit more because there was a weird cut. Can't remember where it was, but it did feel like, wait, what? Where you were here and now you're here.
yeah,
There's a middle bit missing.
so I was talking in the Discord about, and I'm loving the Discord because I'm getting feedback in the Discord about the things. I'm like, yes, that's cool. I like that, and I'm getting discussions moving for and I'm looking forward to people from Vaultcraft going into the Discord and talking about it, because when we get into the episode, side tangent. So what you're seeing is exactly how I work. So when you go, what happened? What happened was I got distracted by something. Like I went somewhere else or I did something else and then I came back. That can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. But most of the time it's or I went off and did something and then I forgot where I was. And I was like, I don't really know how to make this into a story, so I'm just gonna have to leave it sort of cut right now. And that's something I'm working on. I'm like, how do I build a story out with stuff that's so sporadic? I don't know. That's something I'm learning at the moment. And I just saw a message in Discord, which is probably continuing that chat, because my storytelling in Vaultcraft is going to be very similar to the Minecraft videos, because that's what I'm using as inspiration. And it's kind of like this episode, I'm planning on doing this thing. And then like the next clip is, yeah, I'm not doing this thing because I'm doing this instead, or I'm doing this instead. And I decided to go over there. And then towards the end of the episode, you actually get around to doing the thing. Or you maybe don't get around to doing the thing, you do something else. Like, because it's recorded over a period of time, rather than me setting out and going, I'm going to record for an hour and do this. It's I'm working in my vault for 8 hours today, 8 hours tomorrow, 8 hours the next day. I'm going to record the bits that I think are interesting and valid and useful, and try and mumble that together into some sort of video. So I really don't have to think about the video at all. It's just I'm just going to work in Obsidian and record what I do in Obsidian, narrate over what it is, which I do anyway because I talk to myself, and then post it as a video.
I like it.
I mean, there will be other like planned videos. Like I've had a few people now ask me to review Mem, so maybe I'll do a Mem review, or a day in Mem as a video. I don't know. But all my research, once I've got this Vaultcraft tour out of the way, I say out of the way because I'm interested in the research, but I recognize people need to understand the Vault before they can really. It's kind of like Minecraft when you go into a new world. When you join the series at like episode 100, you're like, how'd they build that? What's this? What's that? And you're lost. The Vaultcraft series won't be the same, but because each episode will be a note, but they still need to understand like what the Vault is, which is where like the world tours. This is what we did here. This is what we did there. This is this build and blah blah. I need a world tour. I need a Vault tour for people to jump back to. So it's once I've done that, it's just this episode I'm doing this, whatever it is. And I can review things as well, which I'm excited about. Essentially, all of the research videos that I've done before Vaultcraft, I can, instead of saying, these are the points that I want to critique, I can say, these are the points I want to critique, and this is how it links into my Vault, and how it changes shapes, evolves my thinking, my ideas, and you get the connections. But that's me liking it. I don't know if other people are going to like it. I know you do, but then you're a nerd like me.
Yes.
So, but I've put Obsidian on the thumbnail, so I get more clicks.
I love that.
But yeah, we're still recording, so I'm gonna stop recording. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah, same.
If you've had any thoughts, ideas, questions, do let us know.
Yeah, please talk to us, people.
Yeah.
All done. We'll just keep talking.
And something else that I want to add right at the end of this: Vaultcraft, even though it's my series, it's not just my series, because the way that I've narrated it is anyone can do Vaultcraft. You don't have to be in Obsidian. It could be Rome, because your Rome graph is your vault. So anyone could copy, steal, take Vaultcraft as their own and show how they link, how they work, how they make connections with notes on their own channels, which in an ideal world would be amazing, because then I can go to someone else's vault if they push it publicly, which is the idea. I can go to their vault and go, oh, I saw so-and-so's Vaultcraft episode where they did this, this, and this. They got me thinking about that, that, and that. I'm now going to do it over here. So now you have a community building around Vaultcraft. And as the end goal, that would be amazing. Imagine that, YouTube creators creating a vault that they share, the notes that they share. So instead of going, look at my B-roll of this video, and so-and-so made a video however long ago, you can literally go through the videos as they go, critique backwards and forwards, and have discussions. That's what I want. But I'm on episode 2.
It doesn't even have to be one app either.
No, that's what I'm saying.
That's the thing, because that I'm just like, oh,
Rome, Obsidian, a vault. I've used vault because it's a vault in Obsidian, but a vault is your knowledge vault, to use an August Bradley term. It's just a place.
It's the environment that you're in.
Yeah, it's just a place that you have knowledge. It could be your standard notes. It could be a mind map. It could be an iPad. It could be anything. Any sort of vault of knowledge, any note of knowledge can be used and developed, because everyone will have that. And it doesn't even have to be written down. As long as it's shared in some way, someone can then commentate on it. And I'm going to commentate on people's videos and content that isn't Vaultcraft specific. But if it is Vaultcraft specific, then I can push the narrative of building out, crafting your vault environment of knowledge, which students, I think, would be useful for. I mean, you look at all the medical students, if they were to see other medical students critiquing other medical students' notes or their processes, or them continuing thinking, now instead of having 100 medical channels on YouTube talking about the same thing and the same topic, active recall, great. I watched that video, I do the same thing, but do it differently like this. Now you have a reference point to where they started. Oh, reference, something people don't seem to have on YouTube.
That's a fun piece. That my brain is just like, and we could do that in business.
Huh?
But
that's
easy.
it. Vaultcraft, craft of knowledge of what, where, how. Everyone can get involved in that. Doesn't have to be Obsidian. Doesn't have to be productivity. Doesn't have to be computer science.
Doesn't even have to be one app. That's another one. It could be multiple, because I could do a Vaultcraft series on how I create content, Descript. That's part of it. How I find the ideas, how I
Exactly. That's the idea anyway. That's a bit of it's an out there lofty idea. I wouldn't call it a goal because I'm not really working towards it. I'm just doing my own thing, but it'd be nice.
That's pretty cool.
Right. Close it out there. Yeah. If you have any ideas, questions, want to contribute or anything like that, let me know. Or let us know. I was going to say let me know for Vaultcraft, but yeah, let us know. Discord, Twitter, anywhere. Right. Bye.